Hey friends, welcome back to the Happy Homeowner Podcast. You know, I believe that owning a home is the largest and most valuable asset we have, second to our time. As a veteran mortgage professional, investor, and outdoor enthusiast, my commitment is to bring you content each week that will fill each one of these buckets in your life. I want you to jump on board today. We got a great one for you, and we'll see you on the other side. Hey, welcome back to the outdoor edition of the Happy Homeowner Podcast. I'm excited. Well, I've got a veteran guest here today, Connor. Connor's been here a lot, but we got Captain Paul Kim on today talking about Lingcod. Now, this is going to be a good one because, one, the opener is just right around the corner. But two, I've only kind of done this with you, Connor. I've never had a tutorial on this, so this is going to be good. So welcome back, Connor, and welcome Captain Paul Kim.
Hey, thanks for having us, Dan. I appreciate it. First time meeting you today, and great to be here in the studio.
Well, I think we're going to be fishing with you on the opener, so this is going to be it's kind of a coin toss right now. So we're talking about this. If the weather's good enough, we're going to head up to 7.
Oh yeah,
okay?
Nice.
And then if it's not, and we don't want to make the trip all the way up there and deal with the straits, we're going to stay here with Captain Paul. So I'm going to let you take it away, Connor. I know you've done a little bit of research on tides and some rules. We're going to start with tides, rules, regulations, and then I don't know if you can see it in front of us, but we've got rods, reels, we got gear, and this is going to be a good one. Yeah, so buckle up for an incredible show today.
Yeah, let's start with the rules just so we get that out of the way. When we're fishing for Lingcod, you got to be in 120 feet of water or less, and that's from the Puget Sound up to the San Juan Islands. So 120 feet of water or less, which is nice. You don't have to use a bunch of weight. There's a lot of structure in that shallow water, so we find it all over the place in under 120 feet. Those Lingcod have to be from 26 inches to 36 inches, so if you catch a short or one bigger than that, you got to let them go. On your boat, you have to have a descender. That's super important. If you're fishing for any kind of bottom fish, you have to have a descender in your boat, and it has to be rigged.
Okay.
If it's not rigged, they kind of will, the game wardens will definitely talk to you about that. And that's for the instance if you catch a rockfish, you know, the air bladders will blow out of their mouth, and you got to descend them back to where you caught them from.
Yeah, got to be a good sportsman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
Those are pretty much the basic rules. You have to be barbless. Everything in the Puget Sound and the San Juans, you're going to be barbless. Now, I called the game department this year to check this. You are allowed to use treble hooks in the Puget Sound for bottom fish. You just have to be barbless.
Okay.
So you have to pinch all 3 barbs on your treble hook, but you are more than welcome to use those.
Okay.
And then, of course, your live bait rigs and your jigs and stuff all have to be barbless as well.
Got to run this by Captain Paul.
Yeah.
Are you a treble hook guy for bottom fish?
And if you see, we'll talk about that in the tackle tech portion of this. I am running a treble on the stinger, and of course, going back to what Connor said, definitely got to keep those barbs pinched. So make sure that you run the test on your barbs, making sure that there's nothing in there that will pick up any potential damage to any rockfish species. That's what we're looking at, is protecting the rockfish.
Cool. I love it. Okay.
Possession bar has a whole bunch of rockfish on it. Yeah. Especially when you start running these swim baits, you catch all sorts of them. So you got to be barbless.
Love it. Okay. So we've got some rules, some regulations.
Those are your basic rules. Yeah. And then if we're going to look at the tides, I treat everything in the Puget Sound, the San Juans, you're fishing around the tides. And the San Juans especially, the water's going to be moving a lot quicker. Possession bar, the water's going to move a lot. So I always look an hour before, an hour after the tide. Okay. That's when your water's going to slow down, and then it shifts and turns and goes the other way. On May 1st, is that a Wednesday?
Yes,
it's a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So your low tide's in the morning. It's at 6 a.m. It's not really a low tide. It's 7.5 feet.
Okay.
And then your next tide is a high tide, and that's at 10 a.m. And that's an 8.2. So there is barely any water movement happening in the morning.
That's a small one. Yeah.
It's a very small tide. And generally, just my rule of thumb for salmon, for halibut, for lingcod, I definitely like when the water moves more, because those fish are going to kind of get out of the current while the water's moving, and then these lingcod are ambush predators. So when the water starts to slow down, they're going to take advantage of it and be able to feed. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think we'll still all find lingcod, and I think the lingcod fishing will still be good. Yeah. You won't have to use as much weight. You won't have to fight the current quite as much. Your drifts are going to be slower, so you can kind of your drifts will be dialed in as far as you're going to cover everything that you can.
Okay, hey Paul, what do you think about these tides as a guide?
Oh, from a guide's perspective, it's perfect. It's super ideal with that little bit of exchange going on.
Okay.
It gives you the flexibility to get the bait down, keep it down, and present your offerings in as natural manner as possible.
100%.
So these are apex predators and hunters, and so we want to give them as much time, face time, as possible, so that they will have success.
Definitely.
Okay. So we got a lot of questions that came in when I started throwing this out there that we were going to do a Lingcod podcast. One of them was, what is your strategy when it comes to the tide? Are you using the tide to move over rock structures? So let's talk about that kind of before we get into gear, because I think like for example, last year when we fished the opener, we were up in the San Juans and the tide was smoking, right? When we were over by Decatur, right?
We didn't catch very many fish for the first hour or two.
It was hard to stay on different structures. So let's, Paul, you can talk on this if you'd like. Like, what are your strategies? If you're up fishing a rock structure, are you just drifting over? I know you have some technology on your boat that allows you to do some advanced stuff, but let's assume that most of us don't have that technology. Are you kind of drifting over, picking up, going back? Are you reverse motoring over? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, not so much reverse motoring, but if I'm drifting, I want to look at an ideal current more than so the tide. So I'm looking at a current of probably 1 mile or less, right? And so I want to stay relatively consistent and slower, so I don't have to add a whole lot of weight. Okay. Adding more weight is going to get you into potential more problems out there because of the structure. Now, looking at the quarry, these lingcod will be kind of nestled into their holes and into the crevices, into the areas where they can camouflage themselves and essentially attack the prey. And so that being the case, you can put more weight down there if you're not getting down, but if you're fighting the current, then you're just gonna be replacing leads after leads and leaders and hardware. So optimize the currents as well, and kind of correlate that with the tides, and use those two functions together to maximize your fishing success.
Cool. And then you'll know if you're not getting down there because your line it'll drift away from the boat, drift away from you,
You'll be scoped out, quite a bit,
Okay.
and it's just not going to be applicable
fishing.
anymore. Yeah, you're just going to be dragging, and then you're going to be hanging up, and so then we're going to have to reset and redo the drift.
So if your line starts doing that, you just got to add a little bit more weight.
Yep.
You do.
Okay, cool.
Either
that or slow the motor, slow the boat down using the motor.
You kind of back troll.
To back troll,
Yep.
Hold yourself in place.
Cool.
Yeah, and the faster you're drifting over these locations, like you said, they're sticky, they're holy, they're rocky. The faster you're moving across these, the more gear you're going to lose. The less time you have to pull your stuff off of wherever it's stuck to, if that makes sense. So back trolling against it makes, when the current's moving, makes a lot of difference. And there's sometimes when you're going to do it more, and then like on this tide, you won't probably have to do it very much. You're just going to go over your spot, you're going to drift over it nice and slow, pick up and go back over and drift again.
So I know as we transition into locations, if you're up in Area 7 or if you're out on the bar, John Sporting Goods has his manual, his fishing guide, right? His fishing journal. He's got some maps in there, but if you're out there, how are you using your technology to find where you need to fish for these guys? Because if you're fishing a sandy bottom, that's not necessarily where you want to be. Right. Yeah. So let's assume that someone's just kind of getting into lingcod fishing. What do they need to know about where to fish for lingcod?
Well, like what I do is I have the app on my phone. It's called Navionics.
Okay.
And that's an incredible source to look for structure. Okay. You're looking for, I call them tabletops, so something that comes up to a shallow plateau and then it drops back off. Okay. You're looking for, the best is rock structure. You got a rock pile. There's a bunch of little stuff that they can nestle into. You're also looking for depression, so a hole of some sorts. Okay. They're gonna sit in that hole and wait for something to go across the top of them, and then they're gonna ambush it. Okay. For me, you can look in all those depths up to 120, but I usually start shallow. I start in 30 feet of water, and I'll go all the way out to 60 or 80 feet. You'll see a lot of the guys on possession bar fishing that 60 to 100 feet of water. Okay. There's a lot of structure there, but if you get up on top of the bar and get in shallow, there's all sorts of little nooks and crannies there you can fish. And possession is generally fairly sandy. Okay. but there's a lot of little pile. They have that structure off the east side that they dumped on there. The west side has some little structures, some rock piles.
Okay.
So you just kind of have to do your homework, and I mark them all on my phone.
Okay.
And then when we get on your boat, I kind of just look on your fish finder and match them up, and then we go and look at them.
Cool.
You do a couple drifts across it. There's nothing there. We move on to the next one.
Okay. Okay.
What about you, Paul?
So maybe to add on to that, I like to just drop little breadcrumb trails too, and maybe put a waypoint marker. So if you're not quite sure where the current and the tide are drifting, maybe do a start location, drop a pin, see where you end up on that drift, drop another pin, and then that way you can intersect the 2 points together, and then you know which ones are more effective. Then you can change the color or the designation on the waypoints where you pick up fish, and that way you know exactly kind of where to target as well. So one hint that I could probably suggest.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. Okay, good. All right, so locations. Why don't we start? Gosh, I love this gear here because I'm excited because I've never fished inside. I've never fished possession bar for ling or halibut, and it's a different way because when we go up to 7, we're casting these little swim baits, right?
Yep.
So let's start in possession bar. Let's start inside.
Okay.
Why don't you give us a tutorial? We're going to talk everything from rod, reel setup, catching your bait, and getting after these guys. So I'll let you take it away, Paul.
Yeah. Well, just real quick, maybe before talking about the gear, can we talk a little biology?
Let's do it.
Can we do that? Can we do that? Okay, because I'm a scientist, and I like to always just do my research on these species, whether it be bait or whether it be the quarry that we're looking for. So lingcod, first of all, they're an incredible fish. Okay, they've got a long range all the way from North America. You can find them in the Gulf of Alaska, all the way down the western coast of the United States, all the way down to Baja California, essentially, right? So you got to think about the fish, right? Pretty awesome that they can live in these different temperature zones, right? But voracious predators, they will take pretty much anything that's put in front of their face well presented, okay? So before we talk about the tackle, you just got to understand and appreciate the fish. So from a scientific standpoint, they're also known as Oligliofawn elongatus, okay? That's the scientific name of them, okay? So they are a close distant relative to a larger species of fish that lived in a ice age period, right? And they found fossils of these things. So if you look at them, very prehistoric-like.
I can't imagine running into a larger version of a lingcod.
Oh yeah. So you got to admire that. You know, the huge, powerful pectoral fins, the teeth, their camouflage nature, their appearance. They're just apex predators. You got to give them kudos and hats off to that part of it, right? 100%. And so I was so excited to do this podcast, and so we'll talk about the tackles and techniques, but just understanding them and where to find them is going to really help to your overall success out there. So
100%.
Knowing that they don't have a lot of other predators that chase them, and so they can get to very large sizes, but as Connor mentioned, we do have a slot limit here in the Sound, 26 to 36 inches. We do that to protect the larger breeding females, which come into maturity a little bit longer than the males. So typically 3 to 5 years is when a female will become mature enough to lay her eggs. The males will come into these rocky structures and they will kind of clear out an area for the females to invite the females to come and lay her eggs. And then the female will leave. The male will protect the nest. Okay. Until the larvae have hatched. Okay. Once they hatch and they're viable swimmers, they stay in that pelagic zone, feeding on whatever might be offered. Okay. So this happens sometime in the frame of December, through those colder months when they start their spawn. The eggs will hatch in the spring, which is happening now, March and April. And then we have a season for them in May. So the hope is that by May, the larger females will be gone and back to the deep feeding and growing and living out there. What will be left over are the smaller males and then the progeny of that. And so, so there is a way to distinguish between a male and a female. Did you guys know that?
No way.
Did you know that?
Nope.
Okay, yeah. So, so if you flip over a lingcod, between the anal opening, okay, there's a small little protrusion there. It's called the name escapes, the conical pellicle. Okay. A conical pellicle, okay? So shaped like a cone, but a little point, okay? And if you flip that over, that will be the male of the species, okay?
Wow.
So,
Interesting.
So even if you catch a female that's of keeper size, I'll look at that pellicle, see if it's present or not. If it's a female, and even within maybe that 27, 28, I'll let it go.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll let it go, just because I want that future progeny to come back and be a good fishery for all of us. So we talked about being good stewards of the environment. It's okay to do that, right? Because it's a one fish limit. You know what? It's like, I might do that, right?
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
if I'm fishing just for me or just some buddies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so that is really cool. So hopefully you guys learned something new about that part of it as far as the
we got
range.
a captain and a biologist with us today.
Well,
I
that's
love
my
it.
background, really.
Oh, yeah.
I started off as a scientist, and
it.
and it crossed over to the curiosity of fishing and what they're eating. You know,
So
what you know, how we can mimic, how we can attract them, how we can target them.
I'll be looking at every fish now.
Yeah. So don't forget that, the conical pellicle, right?
Okay.
Cool.
So yeah, these lingcod will generally the males will come into the spawning age maturity at 2 years of age. We talked about the females being 3 to 5. So the males are the ones that we want to keep, kind of like the crab that we get out there too. So if you can selectively harvest, I encourage you to do that. They're a lot of fun. They're really super tasty. They're a high prize for our sport anglers. I know everyone's excited out there to get out and fish for them. But, you know, let's be good stewards about it as well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
good.
yeah.
That was awesome.
Hopefully that helps going forward here.
Well, understanding what they're feeding on and how and the
Yep.
why behind it. I always like to learn a little bit more about that, because I think it helps you become a better angler or better at whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
So now that we know that, and we're fishing out here, let's say Possession Bar, there's a strategy that you guys use out here. You catch these little sand dabs or little mini flounders, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about the two different ways that you're catching these lingcod out here. That just sounds like too much fun.
Oh, it's a blast.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to do that with my son.
Well, we can go over how to catch flounders.
Okay.
I'll do that portion of it. It's very simple. Paul has his rig here. He has just a crappie rig, but where
You want me to grab it?
Oh, here we go. This is
Yeah,
what
you
I
got
want.
your stuff over there.
This,
Yep.
there's 100,000 ways to do this.
Okay.
This is just the simplest, quickest, easiest, fastest way to do it.
Okay.
I use these little Gamakatsu top and bottom rigs.
Okay.
So what you're going to have here is a leader I think they're about 1.5 feet, 2 feet long.
Okay.
You're going to have 2 little short leaders off of it with hooks on it. And the reason why I use a bigger hook is so these flounders don't swallow the hook. They swallow the hook and you try and get one out, you're gonna kill the thing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than trying to fish a dead flounder at the end of the day because all your bait died. Doesn't work as well.
Okay.
So this is simple. You can use your lingcod rod, but generally we're gonna have rods set up to catch flounders, and then we're gonna have our lingcod rod setups. Anything that's going to accept probably up to 4 ounces. I don't imagine that you're ever going to use over that. Sometimes you use 6 if the current's moving, but it's really easy. It has a large snap on the bottom where you're going to snap. It's going to be hard to see to snap your weight to, so your weight's going to be pounded on the bottom.
Yep.
And then it's got a little barrel swivel on top that you'll tie your main line off to. And I've found,
Dan, if you want to hand that to me, I can show that to you guys if you guys can see it. So this is a pretty
Exactly the same.
inexpensive setup here. It's just a Zebco rod. And we double these as our squid fishing rods actually for our squid trips. Same thing what Connor talked about here. I use a crappie rig with a very stiff kind of an arm on this. I add a little bit of braid on here and I tie a handshake loop so then I can change the hooks if they dull out or rust out. And I add just a little bit of squid. I know Connor likes to use those gulp worms, which are really popular as well. And then I put a little dropper, a cannonball. In this case, this is a 4 ounce, right? And so that gets down to desired zone. You know, we're looking at 70, 80 feet for our flounder generally. And so I put a little dropper with a little bit of mono on there because then it keeps everything off the bottom. Those flounder will smell and see that bait. They'll come up to that and investigate, and you'll feel like a tap tap. And so a lot of times we'll get singles, and sometimes we'll get doubles, right? And so that's one element of the bait fishing part that we use. So I keep this always rigged up and ready to go, because if we burn through a lot of flounder, the live well's going, I'm going to want to replenish that. And so then I can keep that. I don't have to convert and stop and shift. I can run my live bait rigs. I can run another rod with a swim bait. We'll talk about that a little bit more too.
Okay. So ideal size of these little guys. What
size of your
hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Palm of your hand. Yeah.
Okay.
Now it can vary. You can use bigger and smaller, but that's kind of the ideal size.
Okay.
About the palm of your hand.
Okay.
Something that when the Lingcod grabs it, he's going to grab the whole thing.
Grab it, take it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then,
so we got our flounders.
You got your. Yep.
There's another one you can catch. They call them pogies, which are little piling perch. These are going to be. They're a little more sensitive. They're not quite as hardy as your flounders are. But they work wonderfully. Some days you catch your fish on flounders, and some days we catch them on the pogies.
Okay.
And these are caught by any piling that's out there. You know, Columbia Beach has a set of pilings kind of to the north end of it. We catch them off of there.
Okay.
You'll see guys tied up to pilings fishing for them. And generally we're going to use a sabiki rig for those.
Okay.
Just your regular Gamakatsu sabiki rig. I think P-Line makes a sabiki rig. But you have a long leader with 10 hooks on it. They're a pain in the butt. They get caught on everything. But, you know, you'll bring up 3 or 4 piling perch at a time, and those are great. They work really well.
Okay.
Some days they want those, and some days they want flounders.
On a typical fishing trip, Paul, how many of these sand dabs, little flounders, are you catching? You going to go through a dozen, 2 dozen?
Yeah, I mean, the limit is 15 per person,
Okay.
but generally you don't want to overload the live well with too many of them. It's more about the size and the quality of the flounder than it is the quantity.
Okay.
So I can start with half a dozen just to start with per angler.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just go from there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Is it time to jump into how do we rig these things when it is time to fish for a ling? Okay.
Definitely.
So which one of these guys you want me to grab?
You go ahead.
Yeah.
Paul.
Okay. So that beef stick, we can. This is a one piece. The blue wrap with the red and
there you go.
red and clear Avid on there. Okay. So this is a one piece rod. Daiwa makes this. It's a 701 medium action. It's a one piece rod, and I like this because it's got a lot of backbone, it's got a lot of strength. You don't have to worry about the ferrules coming apart on it. And I've coupled this with a lever drag reel. It doesn't have a line counter on there because I'm relying on the drop to hit bottom. Generally, we're not going to be needing to fish too deep on this, anywhere from 30, 50, 70 feet, right? Depending on how much current there is on this. And so what I've done is I've rigged this on a slider system here using, I don't know if you can see that in the camera there, but I can kind of dangle that, and Connor's got one almost out of your face there. Yeah.
Slidos.
So Puget makes these, or I know SMI makes them as well. So you can get a variety of these sliders. Pre-rig these up, what I recommend, put them on a little kid's floating noodle that's slotted out, or a bait holder, or a leader holder rather. I like to run probably 30, 40 pound leader in about a 4 or 5 foot length. And then I'll tie on using a snell knot. And I don't know if you can see that. I'll use a bigger point hook, and again, pinch those barbs down, and I'll snell that. And then on the tail end of that, the stinger, I've got, in this case, it's a small treble, okay? And again, pinched barbs down there. So if you want to put this across your hand as reference, just to make sure your spacing's right, okay? The point of the point hook, the bait hook that holds the flounder and the jaw, is going to be right at the bend of your wrist, the crease line, and the tail end of this is going to be right at your kind of the middle finger, right? And so I want to skin hook one of these trebles right underneath the skin, and then pop it back out. So then I've got 2 other points to get those. To get those Lingcod on. Okay. So not only that, and so I think Connor's brought some bait buttons or some bumpers. We like to add those on the point hook. That gives a little bit extra resistance against that crushed barb, so that flounder doesn't slide off of that, right? And so you can use that or a bait button. in a pinch, I've also taken rubber bands from produce rubber bands, cut them into little squares, and then added that on as well, just to kind of prevent that bait from losing or coming off, right?
I got you.
So it's kind of nice. The advantage of these Buzz Bomb bumpers, right? They already have a hole in them, and they're pretty thick, and then they'll fit right on that 5.0 or 6.0.
So you put the hook through, and then you pop that little sealer on.
Bait up the flounder.
Okay.
Take one of these guys, put it right on there against that, and that'll kind of hold that flounder from sliding
Now that
off.
top hook, that's obviously that's going through the head. How are you putting that through the flounder?
There's a hard part of the jaw where I like to go through there.
Okay.
So or the nose, you can nose hook them.
Okay.
And so you don't want to get in their brain and kill them, right?
Yeah.
And so you just want them to flutter around, okay? And you want them to flutter around because that action's just going to drive the Lingcod crazy when you drift this setup over them. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Okay. And so then on the slider, you'll see there's a coast lock swivel on there. You can either tie on a cannonball and again adjust your weight as needed based on the current. And I also like to add a little bit of mono on that as like a shock absorber, so it's not. You don't totally potentially lose this whole rig. You can just break off the mono, and then all you have to do is just tie on a new cannonball. Then instead of tying on a whole new leader.
And your dropper is what, 6 inches?
6 inches, 5 to 6 inches.
So he's tying that to his cannonball right here, right off your snap.
You guys understand that? So it's about a 4. What did you say, about 4 to 5 inch?
Yeah, 5 to 6 inches.
And you like using what kind of mono? What test?
So you can go as light as 15, 20.
Okay.
That way it breaks off, and then you don't having to you lose your braid or you lose your heavier.
Right.
These leaders I'll use a little bit heavier because they're toothy creatures, right? We don't want them to potentially saw through this leader.
And what did you have down here? 40?
Like 30.
30? Okay.
40. 40's good.
Okay. And then let's talk about your reel. You've got, it looks like you're running some braid there, just general setup.
Yeah, and I use this I multi-purpose this for my tuna fishing too. I mean, we don't guide here for tuna in the sound, but these are nice lever drag reels. It's just there's a bait setting on them. This is the Everett S or the MXL. Just got 50-pound braid on here. And that's sufficient for the sound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The good old treble hook. There we go.
Yeah. So in this application, you can use a treble. Just make sure you're pinched down. Okay, guys.
Love that.
Yeah.
Great tips.
And
Okay.
Also, to top that, you can also run just a single hook on the back too. If you don't want to run a treble, like John's going to run a 6/0 circle on top. And it's the same thing that Paul was saying. A circle hook has just a little bend at the tip of it, so it helps keep that bait on there. If you're using a pogie, so one of the perch, you got to use a smaller one because these 5/0s will just wreck them and they'll die really quick.
Okay.
But so you do a 6/0 circle or a 5/0 circle on top, and then you would trail it with the same size.
Yeah.
You could do a 5/0 or circle, but you'd use an octopus on the back.
Yeah, and I've heard you both say this, that keeping the bait alive as long as you can is key. You want that thing down there moving, not just drifting in the...
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Good stuff. All right, so we caught our sand dab. We're out there, we're fishing. That's live. Any other ways that you like to fish for them inside?
I do, yeah.
I
can definitely cover that. If you come into my store, you guys all know I'm a huge believer in the Storm swim bait, my friends. This one here, I have killed a lot of lingcod with these things.
Nice.
There's 2 colors. This one actually resembles a piling perch quite a bit. It looks like a pogie. It's kind of a clear brownish color. The problem with these, it's not really a problem, you just adjust to it, but they're 7/8 of an ounce. So you're not gonna run this naked. You're gonna run the same exact setup Paul has. You're gonna have a Slido in front of it, and you're gonna snap weight to it. And the advantage to that is then your cannonball's leading this. So cannonball has less opportunity to get snagged on the bottom than say a hook. Okay. So it works great. And you can kind of see I have it set up right here. I'm a little different than Paul. I run a level line. You absolutely don't have to. You can run a lever drag, which is a phenomenal setup, but this is kind of how my rig is going to run. Same Slido. I run it to a barrel swivel, and then I have 2 feet a leader. I use 50-pound, 40-pound works wonderful. If I'm running live bait, I would absolutely run 30 or 40-pound. It lets that critter swim around a little more.
Right.
The reason I run 50 on these is I can straighten these hooks out on these. You've probably seen me do it up on your boat, Dan. I can straighten the hook out on those Storm swim baits. And then I'll bring that thing back in.
Cool.
Well, we went through at least a dozen of those things last year.
Oh, yeah.
I think 4 or 5 packs.
I'm bringing more this time because I remember we got down to the last one.
Yeah, you get snagged up. Fishing the rocks, you lose some gear.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, if you wouldn't mind, there's a swim bait back there, right there. I'd like to just show that one too. So
there's lots of options of swim baits. I'm not saying this is the only one. This is.
Oh yeah. So I want you guys to take a look at this. So this comes out of British Columbia. This is a West Coast tackle swim bait. This is in the root beer color, right? What's really cool about this is it's 10 ounces. Okay, so in cases where you can't get down with that storm, here's a baby that you want to use, and so. You'll see how balanced this is. Okay, the weight is molded actually inside, or the silicone is kind of injected around the weight. Okay, and what's really cool is that there's also the stinger hook that's already pre-built into this, right? And you'll notice that jig eye is right on the top. Okay, and so. I'm really excited to run this. We haven't run it yet because this is a new product, right? Yeah. And it comes in this halo hyperglow color, right? And it glows in the dark.
So
like
behind
crazy.
us is pretty dark down there on the bottom. That thing was glowing.
Yeah, it was glowing like crazy. Yeah. So check this out. You can see where the balance is. If I ring this up, okay. So. Do you think that's going to hang up in the rocks, or if you get in a drift, you can pretty much let this bait fish itself, because that paddle tail is just going to be fluttering down there, and it's just going to drive the Lingcod crazy. So I'm really excited to test drive this guy. They come in chartreuse, this root beer color, and then I'm really excited to try that orange color.
You know, West Coast Tackle's been doing a really good job on social. I follow those guys; they're doing an incredible job. They got some new gear coming out
products.
too. So that's smart though.
Yeah, really great products. And so definitely they're angler minded, they're fishing minded. They want to make sure that their gear lasts. I can pretty much hands down say it's just their paints, their finishes, and their quality, and the components that they're using in their lures. It's really a cut above.
Well, the cool thing too is they're up in the islands, right? Vancouver.
Oh, they're based out of Vancouver.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not a whole lot different than what we're doing down here.
It's not.
I want to come back to. So last year when we went out with you, you hooked Huddy up. You set Hudson, my son, up with a really great rod and reel setup. Yeah. This is very similar, but a little different. Let's talk about this because you've got this down at John's. I really like the looks of this.
There's all sorts of. Let's see. Got a couple things in here. This is a new product that Daiwa came out with this year. It's still the Harrier rod, which they make two different models. This is kind of their higher end. This is actually a slow pitch rod. So this is their slow pitch Harrier, which is basically a dart. I'm going to run a swim bait on it. It's such a lightweight, fast action rod. This is a 6.5 foot heavy. Okay. The ones that I sell at the shop, they're I think 6'4", so they're a little bit shorter. The blue one, I believe I got Hudson. And they're a medium heavy. They both handle a bunch of weight. This thing can hold 14 ounces of weight. And I wish you guys could hold this thing because it's about as light as a feather. They're great for like what I'm doing. I'm holding onto my rod all day long, so a lightweight rod works good. A fast action rod works really good too. It's you can feel bites really quickly with this. It's stout, so it has backbone. When I get a bite, I can set the hook really fast. Cool. These swim baits are great. To kind of point on what Paul was saying, these tails on here make this probably the easiest thing you could possibly run. As you know, when I'm on your boat, I'm clicking, I'm tapping the bottom, I'm bringing it up, and I'm doing that all day, and I'm not jigging it. I'm just letting the boat pull this over any structure. These short rods make it easy for that. Like I said, it's lightweight. I pair it with a Tranx. You don't have to do it that fancy, but this is basically a saltwater bait caster. Akuma makes one. Shimano Takota makes one. And I think the push button makes you, for one, quicker, and two, when I put it into free spool, it engages right back away when I crank it. So I can touch the bottom, I put my thumb on it, I pull it up, and then I engage the spool. And I can do that. I do it probably 300 times every time that I'm fishing for Lingcod. But I'm fishing right off the bottom, and I mean it's a phenomenal setup.
So the same thing.
Yeah, same thing over here. I'm just got it. This is a spinning reel seat versus the level line seat.
Totally.
This is the West Coast version of that. It's a 6'3", but super light. It's solid core throughout. So these things, I've seen them completely tacoed over, bringing in big lingcod and salmon on this little rod. It doesn't look like much, but it is. But check out the balance point on this too. Wow. I'm holding my finger there, so it's just you want that natural feel right in your hands, so that when you're jigging, it doesn't wear out your arm or your hand. Or if you're just using swim baits, or you can toss irons for them. Definitely nice to have.
Yeah, those bigger rods and reels will wear you out. You're working that.
Yeah.
Connor,
yes,
that rod and reel that you just showed us, the gray one, what are we looking at there, rod and reel set up together?
The rod's $150.
Okay.
The blue one that I sell is the a little bit cheaper model. They're $100.
Okay. Nice.
The reels I think are $280.
Okay.
But when you're talking like an Akuma cold water, they make a stainless steel one, or they make one that's just for freshwater, but guys still use them in the saltwater. They're just not going to last as long. You're looking at the stainless one's $180, and then the regular one's $130.
There you go. Same thing. Hose it off, fresh water when you're done. They last forever.
Yep.
Yeah. Take good care of them.
For sure.
That's a sweet setup right there.
Yeah, I haven't used it yet. I'm a Shimano Travala guy, so I'm going over to Daiwa and trying it. That's another great rod, Shimano Travalas. They're basically lightweight jigging rods.
And I noticed too on there, do you have braid? You still running 50?
I run 40-pound
40?
braid.
Okay.
Anywhere from 30 to 50 is plenty sufficient. It'll work absolutely. Yeah, it's tough stuff.
Awesome. Good. I love that. Okay, so you guys were out, whether we're fishing swim bait, whether we're fishing live, you kind of touched on it a minute ago. There's got to be a strategy. You mentioned you drop it down. I've seen guys out there, kind of jigging. Yep. Let's talk how to actually do this to keep your bait. We were just talking about the biology of these guys. How do we keep this presentation in front of these lings longer?
Yeah. Well, like I was telling you, I'm constantly tapping the bottom and I'm bringing it up. You never want to drag any of this stuff on the bottom. You got a time frame from when you touch the bottom to get it off, and the longer it's on the bottom, the more likely you are to lose it. But I'm a huge believer. I do it for Chinook too. How many times I drop my ball, hit the bottom, bring it up. I'm just constantly fishing as close as I can to the bottom without getting snagged. We're going to do a video with Paul. We're going to go up to the San Juans and do this, or a possession bar. And we'll be able to demonstrate kind of how it is, and you'll see how we work this stuff. But I'm not jigging. I'm holding onto my rod. Both of these swim baits are going to just swim themselves. Super basic. The other one I wanted to point out one other lure that is absolutely incredible: the Lancer jigs.
Oh yeah.
And this is a bait where you're going to wear your arm out. You're going to sit. The more you're jigging this, the more action it has. And these things, they have so much crazy action to them, but they absolutely work incredible. We use them up in the San Juans quite a bit. Jigging on possession bar, I don't think it's the number one thing to do, but it definitely will work. My coworker Devin, he fishes them on the possession bar and he catches lingcod on them. But they have two sizes I would use. It's a 4 ounce and a 7 ounce.
Okay.
And yeah, these are going to be the kind of baits where you're going to be jigging constantly and constantly. But they catch nice fish.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Yeah. If I had one color to choose, I'd probably use this copper water dog. The water dog. This has killed so many ground fish on our boats.
That was my next question. Just like John has his go-to for Chinook.
Yeah.
What I was going to say, what is your go-to setup or your go-to color if you were not running live bait?
Right here.
Yeah, copper.
I'd use that one, or I would run the water dog Lancer. Anything that's brown. I mean, in their world, there's a lot of browns and a lot of dark greens and all sorts of stuff. So anytime you can kind of match either a baby lingcod, or you're matching a rockfish or a kelp greenling or a flounder. Those colors are going to be the ones that work good. That's not to say that the high color, chartreuses and glows and stuff don't work too. They do, but in my head, I'm trying to match the hatch. I'm matching the bait.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, it's good to have more than one tool for the toolbox, right? So if you're not getting them on the live bait, be willing to be flexible and switch over to a swim bait. If that doesn't work, go back through with maybe a candlefish imitation as well. And then work the structure, throwing irons and jigging that. So there's a lot of different ways you can get them, right? And I've caught them on fly fishing or hand-tied flies as well. So if you want to get really technical, then and give yourself an experience, then give that a try too. So,
So we had a lot of questions. I think I was going to let this podcast just organically flow because it was going to answer a lot of the questions, which it did. One of the questions that a good buddy of ours, Todd Martin, had was, is the lingcod fishery kind of like a Chinook fishery where it's tide and bait specific? And if so, how do you best address that?
That's a tough one. You can catch them throughout the tide. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the water's moving, you can catch them. If the water's slowing down, you can catch them too. I think it's better when the water's moving, but not, like Paul was saying, if it's moving at 1 mile an hour or 1 knot, I think you're going to have more activity. You're going to hook more fish during this time. If the water's moving a little more, you're going to catch less fish, but you're still going to catch lingcod.
Okay.
It's the same as salmon. You kind of get, points in time in the tide where you're going to really be catching fish, and then it's going to peter out and you're going to get onesie, twosies.
Right.
For sure.
And I think it's going to really depend on your boat too,
Yep.
depending on if you have a live well. And that's going to be an integral element of being able to keep your bait fresh and lively.
Yep.
If you don't have a live well, you may want to consider just getting a 5-gallon bucket with like one of those USB micro air bubblers, right?
Yep.
Just to kind of keep it alive and exchange that water so that you can keep that flounder or pogey or whatever you might find down there as an offering, right? But not everyone's going to want to fish live bait or real bait, or they don't have the option to do that. The kayak anglers or a guy who's just going to be in the smaller boat without a live well or a bucket or aerator, they may just want to fish the artificials, and everything pretty much works. Again, kind of put your mind into the Lingcod's head, right? Like if I was a Lingcod, what will I snap at that has the least amount of energy that I need to expend, or the caloric intake that I need, or the energy that it takes to get the highest caloric intake that I can take.
Definitely.
They're opportunistic feeders, right? And so you're going to put something out there in front of them. 9 times out of 10, they're going to snap at it, or they're just going to turn their head, right?
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Well, you guys do what I've done. If you're listening to this and you have any questions, do what I've done over the last 10 years. Just go down to John's. They will set you up. Connor and his crew are amazing.
Yep.
They'll help you rig this stuff right here in the store.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to encourage you. Everything you've seen here today, Connor's got on his shelves. They're ready. They're locked and loaded. I was down there. You got plenty of inventory.
Yep.
So ready to go for the Lingcod opener. Now, we're going to wrap with this. Captain Paul Kim is one of the coolest guides that I've had a chance to meet. And the reason why I love getting to connect with guys like this is you can tell they don't just show up and fish. They study. This guy's a student of the environment, the water, the fishery. I mean, his biology background. One of the top fishing guys in the area. I want you to visit his website. It's fishpnw.com. So fishpnw.com. There's a lot of good information there. You can book him. So real quick, I'd love for you just to kind of talk a little about your business. So your bottom fish, your salmon.
Yeah, we're bottom fish, we're salmon. We actually started out completely different to get going.
Yeah.
It was actually, we got our licks starting out squid fishing or squid jigging, right? A very popular and lesser known opportunity that we have year round in our Puget Sound, okay? Because number one, it's a whole lot of fun. Yeah. Number two, I had young kids, or I still have younger kids at the time, but they were 5 and 7 at the time, and I was looking for a way to get them outside, get them on the boat, get them engaged, get them fishing with me. And they've had opportunities where we've gone offshore for halibut and lingcod and salmon. They've done all of that stuff, but time and time again, they love flounder fishing and they love squid jigging.
That's so cool.
So then it turned from a family activity into something more, right? And so obviously I like fishing for those other species. Our license covers salmon, of course, and up to tuna, but we don't fish for tuna right now. So essentially Puget Sound is our home. We're based out of Shilshole Bay Marina in the Ballard neighborhood. So yeah, we'd love to have you guys come out and jump on the boat and host you guys for a fantastic and memorable day of fishing.
Yeah, you're all over Area 10, which is kind of my turf. I live in Richmond Beach, so love the fact that we got a pro now. I got a pro now that I can connect with in my own waters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other cool thing, we need to do this coming up. Probably next fall. We got to do a squidding. Episode.
I want both of you guys to jump on the boat. I'll show you what it's all about.
Yeah,
I'll demystify everything.
Cool.
Questions that you have.
Because you could probably take a lot of that and give it to the people like my son and I that just go down to the Edmonds Pier, right? And use the same strategies.
Well, similar, but quite a bit different. The tackle's different. Okay. The technique is different.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
it gives us something to do.
Oh
when
gosh,
you can't fish, right?
I mean, we've lost so much of our winter blackmouth fisheries. Yeah. And so people want to recreate. People want to get out there. People want to fish. And so this is a way to get back on the water, engage, have a lot of fun. It's multi-generational. We've had grandparents bring their kids and their grandkids out, and I guarantee you, we've had the most experienced blue water anglers out there, but when you're out there, you're still giggling like a little schoolgirl. You're catching those squid.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
And they're tasty little suckers.
They are.
Yes,
they are. And they make great bait too. So,
I was, funny enough, I was talking to a guy, a commercial, Hudson and I ran into a commercial crabber the other day. And out in front of our house, and he was like, God, Hudson was like, what do you guys like to use for bait? And he was like, squid.
No kidding.
Oh yeah,
for crabs.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He said
it's great. It's fantastic.
That and clams.
If for a crab bait, for a halibut bait that we're using, it's all squid.
Okay,
it's top notch.
Love it. Guys, this was awesome. Make sure you go down and you visit Connor and his crew at John's. Make sure you reach out and connect with Captain Paul Kim. fishpnw.com. I hope this was valuable. I learned a ton. That's why I love this podcast, because I learn every time I do it. We'll see you guys out on the water, okay?
All right.
Later.